Call this public hearing meeting to order. Looking for Peter. Am I going right to you?
I think I can start. I know Rick, he just logged on. There he is.
Give the town manager a moment to.
Rick, you're muted.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry about that. Had a meeting with our town plan and zoning commission to go over our capital improvement plan. So has the meeting officially started, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So just wanted to start off with, as you can see, we have several key members of our leadership team here tonight to discuss their respective department budgets. And I'll just take a moment to introduce everyone. First, we have our town clerk, Essie Lebreau, who will be presenting her last budget. And I think we may have, is Leon, okay, we have our incoming town clerk, Leon Davidoff, joining us as well, who will officially start in his role on Monday. We have Joe Dakers, our assessor. There he is, Joe. We have Jared Morin, our Chief Information Officer. We have Kathy Lombardi, our Acting Director of HR. And last but not least, we have our finance team. So we have led by our CFO, Peter Privatera, Lisa Newton, our Financial Operations Manager, and Patty Lewis, who is our Budget Manager. And tonight's budget discussion will be split up into various sections. And we'll begin with an overview of the general government section, which includes the town council's budget, the town clerk's budget, town manager's budget, corporation councils, registrar of voters, and our assessor's office. And then after we get through the government section, we will then go to information technology with Jared, finance with Peter and his team, HR with Kathy, and then we'll finish with the non-departmental budget, which where West Hartford-Bloomfield Health District falls under. So why don't we start by turning to page 4.1, which gives you a quick overview of the general government overview by council, clerk, manager, corporation counsel, registrar of voters, and assessor. And you can see overall, among those three departments, we're going from $3.1 million up to $3.2 million. It's a 3.3% increase overall among those 6 areas. The town council is we're seeing a 2.6% reduction in that budget. Town clerk, a 2% increase. Town manager, 8.2% increase. And I'll go over, we'll go through each of these sections individually and explain the reasoning for these changes. Corporation counsel at 3.7%, registrar of voters at 4.8%, and then our assessor comes in at 2%. So if you turn to page 4.3, that's our town council budget. So we essentially have 1.5 positions allocated to the town council budget. We have our town clerk, as well as the assistant town clerk. And you can see under the wages and salaries that the reason we're seeing a 2.6% reduction is the reduction in wages and salaries a reduction of 7.1%. So that the reasoning for the reduction had to do with a retirement and then someone leaving an organization at the higher salary rate and hiring someone in at a lower salary rate. That's that resulted in the 7.1% reduction in wages. If you turn to page 4.4, again, you can see the regular payroll reduction. Everything else is pretty much flat within our the expenses. So our professional services remain at $44,000. Our general contributions to outside agencies remain at 108,000. And our dues that we pay for CROG, Greater Hartford Transit District, and CCM went up very, really slightly from 98,491 to 98,762. And if you turn to page 4 or 5, you can see our contributions to outside agencies are listed at the bottom there. And you can see that they've remained unchanged among the West Hartford Youth League, Noah Webster Foundation, West Hartford Community Interactive, West Hartford Art League, Playhouse on Park, Interval House, West Hartford Community Theater, and West Hartford Symphony. And I will pause there and through you, Mr. Chairman, see if there's any questions that any of the town council may have.
I have a couple of questions. Thank you for that, Rick. So we have a bunch of new people on the council. Can you review for folks how these contributions to outside agencies are determined?
So these are all the history here. This list has remained somewhat unchanged over the last few years. However, it's in years past, if you go back 10 years, there's probably been more outside agencies on a list going back 10 years. But essentially, this is the list of organizations that we've heard from over time and that the town council has heard from over time that we've provided this assistance to. So it's not anything that potentially couldn't be changed if the council wished to look at this differently or add other outside agencies to this list. This certainly would be under the purview of the town council to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and does each year they have to provide some sort of documentation for this? Is that right?
So they would. So we don't have necessarily a documented process where someone can, there's like essentially a form or a process that they would that they'd fill out. Other than they would certainly reach out either through you or through us for consideration, and that would be something that we would, if we had heard from them, bring that to the council, and then certainly the council could bring that to us as well.
Right, because I think in one of our previous meetings, on the that Chairman Pullen headed up, we had a conversation with Interval House, and I think that they were. It's not expressed here in this budget, but they had expressed potentially having us contribute more to that due to the fact that the town probably benefits more from what we're putting into it, or compared to surrounding communities. And do you have available to you kind of like the comparatively what we do for the rest of the council, what other communities do in regards to a contribution to Interval House?
I do, yes. So presently, Manchester provides the highest amount of funding at 80,000. Hartford is at 65,000. East Hartford is at 30,000. West Hartford, as you can see, is at 2,850. And then there's a whole list of communities that go, in that. I'm sorry, Bloomfield is at 2,850. And then from there, I can share this document with the council. And then they have identified the number of clients that they've assisted in each of those towns as well. And, West Hartford certainly is, we have a great partnership with the Interval House, and they provide a phenomenal service to our community and to our police department. They are true partners, and they've assisted, last year they assisted 188 individuals in town. To give you an example, East Hartford, they've assisted 487, Manchester 779, Hartford, a much larger amount, obviously, with the higher population at 2,345 But I can share this, Mr. Chairman, with the town council.
That'd be great. Yes, Councilwoman Blanks.
Well, Mr. Zdanowitz, in all fairness, he had his hand up before me. Okay, thank you, Councilor Zdanowitz. So, excuse me, I just have a quick question. Maybe it could be a review for the West Hartford Youth League. That amount there. What is that covered? Does that cover, I want to say, was it the fields and insurance?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, you're exactly right, Councilor Blank. So the 32,300 that we allocate to the West Hartford Youth League is to cover their cost of insurance.
And that's for all of the activities that come under the youth league, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So that's soccer, baseball, basketball. I can get a list, a breakout from Helen Rubino Turco on the exact number of sports that are covered under this. I do think there's one or two leagues that do fund it themselves, the insurance, but this picks up a majority of our youth leagues, the insurance for a majority of our youth leagues, boys and girls.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can piggyback on that, Mr. Levitt, can you explain why we have a separate insurance program? We talked about this a couple of years ago. A separate insurance plan as opposed to our going outside of the umbrella of the town.
So actually, they're not covered under our town insurance program. Correct me if I'm wrong, Peter. So they actually fund this insurance on their own, and we fund it for them. But Peter,
That's correct. I
okay.
believe that's correct.
Okay.
Right. That's my point is why would if we're funding it, why wouldn't we just absolve them under our umbrella?
I could look into that, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if we could. I'm not sure if we could include that under our risk management fund, but we can certainly take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know, to be honest with you. Yeah, I'd have to look into it.
I remember bringing this up a couple of years ago, and there were it was a conversation that was
Okay.
Mr. Zdanowitz.
Thank you. I had the same questions actually about the youth league, and we just got the received the school budget, and we had a lengthy discussion on pay to play. I agree with that we can potentially, Councilman Sweeney, that we could probably put this into our overall fund. But then, we, like you I think you mentioned, Rick, that, I know we had travel, West Hartford travel leagues that are associated specifically with West Hartford travel. I think we finance our own insurance for that, and the parents pay for that. Just look why seems like a pretty big number one for insurance. I guess there's a lot of leagues, but I'm wondering how we could, maybe bring the high school model to the youth league, and or get that insurance self-funded through the town.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we should also probably take a look at is, over time having a little bit of accountability on this, and kind of having an idea of a report being generated by these organizations to the town on what they're doing with the money, how it's being used. All of these organizations are phenomenal organizations, and as we kind of described, I think we're funding one of them probably improperly compared to our surrounding communities, but I think that from a transparency and accountability standpoint, we should probably have a little bit more reporting and or application process for these, because there may be other things that come up As you know, Mr. Ledwith, being town manager, something new and exciting happens every day. And so I think that we should be prepared for that.
We will do that. Thank you.
Mr. Zdanowitz.
Thank you. And, you know, maybe this would fall under the Finance Committee for the report, so that it could get managed, instead of it coming to all of us, which we could, but I just think it might be appropriate, to your point, to maybe just go through the finance. You know, if you want to report, maybe you could Finance Committee. I think that might be the most appropriate, but I would look to others if anyone agrees that maybe it should be somewhere else or in that one.
Yeah, totally agree. I think we'll get the first ball rolling and kind of get an idea of what the process is, and then we can see where it needs to go, because there's obviously a social service and leisure services component to this as well. So, but I think you're right, Zdanowitz. So, I don't see any other questions. Rick, if you want to move on to the next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I will turn it over to our town clerk, Essie Lebreau. And Essie will walk us through her final budget. Essie.
Thank you. As you'll see on page 4.9 and 4.8, the budget summary regarding our revenues are significantly down, and that's due to the land records transactions being significantly lower. In previous last year, the refinancing that was going through provided a lot more land transactions. I just did a quick little check of our numbers compared to last year right now. And as of this fiscal year, we have 5,466 land records processed, as opposed to 8,292 the same period last year. So you can see the significance of that having on our revenues. In terms of our expenditures, it's basically a 2% increase due to wages and salary contracts. And in regard to operating expenses, we've kept it really almost flat. We will be having a municipal election this year, which will not call for additional staffing, which we usually do. Elections have a big impact on our budget every time, but this will be a small election year. And that also rolls into cost of postage and printing. So that's why you see it pretty flat. The other impact that that's on our budget is in other professional services, and that will depend on how many court reporters we need for our various meetings. We have been utilizing a court reporter for our fair rent hearings, and that has been significant. They're running over $1,000 each. So we've already spent $5,000 this year. It'll probably go up a little more. And also interpretation services that we've been utilizing. So those will have an impact on our budget, but I think we've planned appropriately for that. And if you have any other further questions.
I see no hands. We can, oh, Debs, did you have one?
It's a quick question. We obviously don't know yet what will happen with early voting, but could you give us sort of a rundown of, if it's 2 days of early voting, this is how much we think the extra expense will be. If it's 5 days, do you have any way of estimating that at all?
So that will come under the registrar's budget. We don't expect it to impact the town clerk's office because we handle the absentee balloting. But in discussions with other towns that have done some analysis. And I actually spoke to our chief of police, our building director, to get a sense of how much it might cost us. I understand that there's a 10-day and a 14-day early voting on the that's going to be voted on by the legislature. And when it comes to the number of hours, that can be significant, particularly Saturdays and Sundays. If they're talking a 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., that's going to impact building, police in terms of time and a half, which is something you don't normally think about. Also, the location that they're going to have the early voting occur. Right now, it looks like it could just be one facility that would be necessary, but I'm not sure about that. Depending on how many registered voters you have, the legislature may say you must have 2 locations. So that will also have an impact. So I don't believe, and Peter, when the registrar's budget comes up, I don't believe they planned for anything because they don't know what it's going to look like. But if it is a 10-day, it's going to probably be a couple of $1,000s a day, is my guesstimate. And again, we don't know in each election statute, it specifies how many poll workers you need at that location. So for an early voting location, are we going to need a moderator, an assistant registrar, a DNR of each of those, a ballot tender? And so the number of people staffing that early voting center for 8 hours or 10 hours a day, times 10, and then on weekends with security and building.
Thank you. So we just don't know.
I don't know, but it
All right,
will be
thank you.
$2,000 a day.
Seeing no other questions for the outgoing Madam Clerk, I think we can move on, and thank you, Essie, for your final hurrah. Deb had to give you that one question. Couldn't leave standing up. I'm just kidding.
I wanted to give her an opportunity to answer the question.
No,
Thank you.
just kidding. Thank you, Essie.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will now turn to the town manager's budget, which is on page 413, which starts with a summary of highlights and accomplishments. And as we discussed on the evening of the town manager's budget presentation, these are really collective accomplishments, as they're all derived from the vision of our town council and include the adoption of the transit-oriented development ordinance, to the cannabis ordinance, to the Elmwood Community Center feasibility study, to the significant amount of economic development occurring in every corner of town. It is certainly for these reasons and many more that we continue to be the best town to live in Connecticut, as recognized by most recently Niche, Livability and Study finds. So with that being said, why don't we turn to page 416 and 417. And on 416, you can see the increase of 8.2% on the upper left-hand side, primarily driven by the increase in wages and salaries at 6.4%. So this is a result, as you may recall, at last year's budget, we did fund a economic development specialist position. It was a part-time position the year before, and the council fully funded that position with last year's budget, which is now built into the wages and salaries piece. So that's the reason for the 6.4% increase in the wage line item. Then if you go to page 417, you can see some of our operating expenses and where they're broken up and some of the increases that are built in there. You may recall last year that the council, or actually the previous year, the council had approved the hiring of a special assistant to the town manager. We have since renamed that position to an equity coordinator position. And you'll recall back in the fall that we did hire Adrienne Billing-Smith to serve as our equity coordinator. And with that, we've had to increase our a couple of line items in our operating expenses. We increased our training line item from $2,500 up to $13,500, and that is going to assist Adrienne and the great work that she will be doing town-wide to continue to move forward our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. So that's the reason for the training increase. And then dues and travels with the incorporation of another economic development specialist into our economic development department. Both those two positions, as well as Adrienne's, belong to certain organizations around the state that we will now fund the dues and tuitions for those organizations, which drove had a small increase there dollar-wise, but certainly percentage makes up the largest portion of that increase in operating expenses. So I will stop there, and through you, Mr. Chairman, turn it over to councilors that would have any questions on the town manager's budget.
Not seeing any right now, Mr. Ledwith, so please continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now go to the Corporation Council's budget, which can be found on page 4-21. Our Deputy Corporation Counsel is on a well-deserved vacation in London, so couldn't be here with us this evening. Not much to our Corporation Counsel budget. It's a 3.7% overall increase, primarily driven by cost of living adjustments, as well as a merit increase that was allocated to a member of the Corporation Counsel department. So, but again, not much to the Corporation Counsel budget. I will pause there through you, Mr. Chairman. Turn it over to the council for any questions that you may have.
Not seeing any. Mr. Ledwith, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will now turn to our Registrar of Voters budget. I'll turn it over to Mr. Privatera, who can quickly walk us through the Registrar of Voters budget.
Thank you, Pete Privatera, Finance Director. Actually, I told Essie I was going to hand this off to her as part of her last hurrah, but Councilor Poland asked about whether there was any additional money for that early voting, and I don't see any in here. Everything is pretty much flat. There was a little additional expense for part-time, for voter canvassing, but you know, their budget is just pretty flat. Overall, it's up 4.8%, but the increase in office expense, you know, is relative to the increase in costs of office supplies, printing costs, all the election costs, the state mandated voter canvass. You know, basically that's
excuse me, Peter, the presidential preference primary that will take place in April of next year.
That's why I was going to hand it off to you, Essie.
Yep. Yeah, so that will make it, that's 2 elections next year. And although it won't impact the clerk's office, because we don't normally see a large volume with that to make it a matter in our budget, the Registrar of Voters does have to open all the polling places, provide training, and provide staffing for each of those polling places.
So that's all there is. If there's any questions, I'm sure Essie would be happy to answer them.
I knew.
Surveying the field, seeing none. Please continue.
Mr. Chairman, I will introduce our assessor, Mr. Dakers, who will summarize the assessor's office budget, which, as you can see, is rather small overall increase of 2%. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Joe Dakers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joseph Dakers, the town assessor. I have one extraordinary item, and I want to bring that to your attention under highlights and accomplishments. The very first item is actually a carryover from last year's budget. I would ask that you strike that line item. There's another item that falls below that deals with the personal property audits that we now conduct in-house perpetually. Last year, we did 108 audits. We recaptured $20 million in escaped assessment value. And the lion's share of that was really attributable to the Eversource and how they handle their accounting. The other $4 million is spread about through various other businesses that we audited for that time period. The only other item that we have really is dealing with our subscriptions. We're showing a 17.9% increase under office expense, and I believe collapsed under that category is subscriptions. We have one ask for this cycle, and it's for a commercial property database that would put us on a level playing field with plaintiffs when we're in our tax appeals in terms of market information that goes beyond the West Hartford jurisdiction. We would have access to statewide commercial real estate cost data, rental data, capitalization rates, etc. And so this is the only ask we have, and it would be a critical piece of support for us during our tax appeals. Beyond that, that is really the scope of my my office budget. I don't have a revaluation this year, thank God. So I have to talk about that next year, maybe.
Jaggers, can you just repeat the line that you said to be scratched?
Yes, the very first line where it says 116 business personal property audits.
Okay.
I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you.
Be happy to answer any questions.
I see one hand. Councilwoman Guinness.
Yes, hi. I just had a question. I missed the commercial property database. Where is that expense falling? Under what category in the expenditures?
I believe that has been collapsed under office expenses.
Okay.
Subscriptions.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Seeing no other questions. Mr. Levitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I will turn things over to our Chief Information Officer, Jared Morin, for our two new counselors, although Counselor Poland does remember this as well, having served on the Board of Education. But for Counselor McGinnis, Mr. Morin does serve as our Director of Information Technology for both the town and for the school district, one of a couple of roles that are shared. At this point, I'll turn things over to Mr. Morin.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Good evening. Jared Morin, CIO. The technology budget here supports all other departmental technology needs, as you may recall from prior years, as well as our own internal operations. It's pretty much a roll forward budget with a couple changes that I will now highlight. There's actually a decrease in salaries and Social Security due to attrition and rehiring at a lower rate, and an increase in some operating expenses for about an overall increase of $82,000, or about 6.5%. The main driver for this increase is actually the centralization of all the townwide analog POTS lines. POTS is plain old telephone line, those landlines we all know from back in the day. And we're trying to do this to get a better handle on some oversight and accountability of like, where are these lines? Are they actually in use? Are they labeled correctly? So to that end, we've recently completed a physical audit of these lines at each town and school facility with an outside consultant. We did find a few dead lines and a few mislabeled lines. These analog lines run our elevator alarms, some panic dialers, the fire alarm panels, and it's a very old technology that's been around for decades. So the other driver for this is recently the FCC has changed some regulations where they're basically pricing analog out. So all analog customers in the country are feeling the pinch of the price moving way up, and it's their attempt to force customers off of this older technology. So our goal is to spend the next year or two converting these lines to a digital technology, leveraging some middleware, which should basically help cut the cost in future years. And we're doing that, of course, with our consultant's guidance. The other increases here are just based on observed actuals due to supply chain issues and other obligations that increase naturally every year, like annual maintenance contracts, service level agreements for the town. And lastly, the other notable increase is in the rental and leases line, and this is for two things: the addition of a new backup internet service for the town, and this improves our internet reliability for public safety and the town in general, and also adding public wireless to our outdoor parks and pools, and this is new. As you may recall, we used rescue funds to help that initial hardware purchase, but there's still a monthly recurring cost for the actual internet service, and that's what's represented here. So through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Zdanowitz.
Thank you. Appreciate the information, Jared. The one question I had, because you do go back and forth between the schools in town, is that in the event that the internet went down and we didn't have the VoIP lines at the schools, the internet, or I should say the cellular service for some big carriers at the schools are difficult at best. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of plan, because it would really be kind of a contingency plan for emergency, that some of those lines may be boosted for signal around those schools.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's a great question, and especially the north end of town. We have a lot of problems at Aiken, at Norfeld. So we did walkthroughs recently with Verizon and with AT&T for FirstNet, which is their public safety arm of AT&T. And we've already started installing cellular repeaters. I actually got an email recently from the Aiken principal that she's like, we're getting text messages now and people are hearing their phone ring, and they're very excited that it's actually working. If the power goes out, obviously we have other issues. If the fiber breaks, there's limits to what we can do. So what the security department and I have told the school leadership is, you have your radios, and every handheld radio has an emergency channel. It's a red button. You hit that, and it actually contacts the police over the radio system. So that is our current last resort backup.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of
course. Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney, Deputy Mayor. Jared, quick question. In your presentation, and thank you for that, you talked about the access in the parks, the outdoor parks and pools. I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I certainly don't want to pretend like I'm a techie. So can you just put that in layman terms, how would that work?
Of course. So through you, Mr. Chairman, the answer to this is it's something we've talked about for a while now, just having free wireless outside. So outdoor pools and parks kind of made sense to us. We've already started running fiber. We have 3 sites that have the fiber already. A couple more, we're kind of trying to commingle it with existing construction. So Eisenhower Pool, Wolcott Park are some of those projects we're trying to kind of jump into when they start so that we can save money there. But essentially what it'll be is you can be at the pool, on the pool deck, or just sitting in the park, and you'll see a public free wireless that's being broadcast. And we're actually calling it Wi-Fi, which I thought was a little clever. Mayor Cantor liked that one. So we're hoping to be pretty much live in time for the pool openings this summer.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear that.
Ms. Bullen?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jared. I had a question. What are charge bars that are being researched this year? I did try to Google that. I don't recommend doing that. So I figured, trust me, I assume whatever I saw online is not what we're going to be looking into. So can you explain what those are, please?
Of course. Through you, Mr. Chairman, charge bars are like lockers for charging your phone. So you could charge a tablet, a phone. They can be free or they can be per usage, and you basically open it, put your device in, it charges it while you're out to eat, while you're walking through the center. Maybe you forgot to charge and you don't want to leave your phone in plain sight in your vehicle. These secure locked, basically lockers, like an Amazon locker, you can leave your devices and charge them. So we thought it might be a nice idea for like the parking garages.
Thank you.
Of course.
I'm not seeing any further questions. I think it's back to you, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will now go to our esteemed finance colleagues. Mr. Privatera.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to give you a quick overview of the finance department. Every year since I've been here, we've been awarded by the Government Finance Officers Association two pretty significant awards. One is Distinguished Budget Award, and the second one is Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting. I wanted to say that because, and I'm just saying it for my staff. I know everyone's hardworking out there, but I'm very fortunate to have such a great hardworking staff, and two of them are on this call tonight. But in any case, the finance budget is up roughly $55,000 or 2.1%. And that's primarily due to the full funding of a payroll coordinator. If you recall, last year, when I presented my budget, I had some concerns about the payroll manager retiring, and we only had one person to backstop that. We do have three people now. We have a payroll coordinator and a payroll clerk backstopping the payroll manager. So, when the payroll manager does retire soon, I think we'll be in great shape. But the finance department has four divisions. Financial operations includes accounting, capital financing and debt administration, budget preparation and management, cash management, financial reporting, grants accounting, payroll, accounts payable, and accounts receivable. At one point, there was a 4-month period when we were working on the budget, issuing bonds, and the financial reporting all at the same time. So, we do a lot of juggling. Then we have the purchasing division, who's responsible for central purchasing, for managing fixed assets, and disposal of surplus property. Then we have the revenue collection division, which obviously is the tax collector and billing and collections, and also collecting revenue from parking and ordinance violations. And then last but not least, we have our financial systems division. Now, the financial systems division is key to the transition over to a new financial management system. A few years back, we transitioned over to the Munis financial system, which was significant. And right now, we're in the process of rolling out different modules in the system. I think right now we're working on an HR module. So, all in all, I think a week after the budget is adopted, the auditors are coming in to start the auditing process for the next year. So we always have a lot going on. And the increase in the budget is really related, they're really payroll and merit, increases related to moving the payroll coordinator to a full-time position, one reclassification of one position, and then some merit increases. Our operating expenditures are actually down 1.1%. So, I can go division by division and answer any questions you might have on any expenditure category, but I thought I'd just leave it open to see if there were any general questions first. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think that's a good way to go about this. Actually, if I can for a minute, I'd like to just pause for a minute and go back. I kind of ran through a little bit quicker for some of the council members. Back to Jared. Jared, if I can ask you to come right back for a second. See Phil here. Yep, there is. There is an asterisk on page 5-4 about the positions shared with the Board of Ed and the town. Can you just briefly touch on that?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. That's one of our network engineers. Because we're all one common network now that we've worked over a decade to kind of build for efficiency, we still kind of need that position that oversees both environments essentially. And then under him are two network administrators that work exclusively for the school side. Obviously, the school network is a lot bigger. We have thousands more devices than the town does, but that synergy and that team is second to none. It's been working great.
Oh, and then can you just give the history that is described here for the two new, for all of the new members?
Of course. So when I started back in 2012, there were two separate networks, the town and schools, which is pretty common that they're different in organizations. But we had a unique opportunity with a shared data center down the street. So we built out our own fiber network, which saves the town and schools probably at this point $300,000 to $400,000 a year in what would have been fiber lease payments, like most other towns and schools have to do. And there's no cost to run it. It just exists. And the only time we have a problem is if there's a major storm or squirrels. We've had a lot of squirrel damage. They love to eat fiber for some reason. But even then, it's like an incidental repair, a couple $1,000s, nothing crazy, because fiber is pretty resilient otherwise. So over the 10 years, we've built the network out and we've merged systems. We use a common disaster recovery system, a couple other systems we share, and we're all working now in the exact same office right next door to me. So that constant dialogue and rapport that's just naturally and organically grown, it's great to see. We have a shared phone system as well between the town and schools. So I'm glad we did it. The efficiency is in those license costs and those quantity discounts.
Okay, and then can you just explain why the town versus the Board of Ed funding certain things?
Yeah, so we're very careful not to fund things from the wrong bucket. There's rules, obviously, with education pricing versus government. A great example of that would be Google. So the schools get Google basically for free. And that's, Google's smart. They know if they get into the education sector and get kids into their environment, they're going to become Google customers as paying adults. We looked into Google for government a few years ago, and it was $600,000 just for our town side. And that was not even including the recurring cost of $200,000 to $300,000. So we obviously said, forget that. And we went with Microsoft 365, which is much more palatable. So we are still in some different platforms just because of that. We can't take the education license for government and vice versa where it might benefit. But where we can, we do. So where we can use a common backup system and it saves us money, or we can leverage one person to help oversee two networks. That's where we can do it, we do to save those recurring costs.
All right. Thank you for that explanation. Peter, back to you. Any questions for Peter? And sorry to jump back and forth, but here we are. Any questions for Peter and financial services? Seeing none.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now turn to our human resources budget. And I will just take a moment just to go back in time a little bit. As you may recall, prior to stepping into the acting town manager role essentially about a year ago, I was the executive director of human resources for both the town and the schools. So my salary was picked up half by the Board of Education, half by the town. And when I moved into the town manager's office, Kathy Lombardi stepped up to become the acting director of HR. And then I'd say 2 months later, our HR specialist, who worked very closely with Kathy, unexpectedly retired. So it left Kathy extremely shorthanded at that point. Did a great job of running our human resources department and supporting all of our departments throughout town. Sometime over the summer, we were able to hire another human resources specialist, but essentially now we have 2 HR professionals within the HR department where we used to have 2.5. So we do have an ask within this budget, and that would be to hire an additional HR specialist. So to get the HR department back up to essentially full speed, we would ask, we're requesting an additional HR position in this year's budget to help us appropriately support our entire organization. So at this point, I will turn things over to Kathy, who will give an overview of the human resources budget.
Rick,
For you,
good
Mr.
evening, everyone.
Mr. Chairman, to Kathy.
Yep.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Sweeney. Thank you for that overview, Rick. I too just wanted to give a bit of an overview of our department, and I appreciate what Rick shared. But since we do have some new council members, I actually had a few slides that I wanted to share just to kind of give you a sense of all of the responsibilities that fall under the umbrella of HR. So I am gonna try to share this with you. Well, I'll talk you through it. Here we go. So are you on, Dorida? She was gonna do that.
It was up there, Kath, and now it's not there.
Oh, it's not there. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, Kathy, would you like me to share or are you going to share?
You can share. Thanks, Dorida.
You're
That'd be
welcome.
great. You can go to the next page. Can you go to the next page, Dorida? So here's just an overview of the categories that fall under our department. And as Rick said, with the change in staffing, we've certainly been stretched a bit. Under the recruitment section, I'll walk you through how timely that process is and what's involved. Then we also have our benefits. Under our benefits, we have pension and health. And for the pension, our benefits division also does the Board of Ed. Under employee relations, we do training and wellness. And then under our labor relations, we are responsible for all of our contract negotiations, any grievances that need to be resolved. If we go to mediation, we are sitting at the table, and then we sit at every contract negotiation. So if you go to the next slide, that just kind of gives you a sense of what we are responsible for. And as I said, recruitment is really one of our largest time consumers, and especially with the challenges that we've been faced with lately as far as attracting people, people leaving, people retiring, we've found that a lot of our time is spent recruiting. And I think with the addition of another HR specialist, that certainly would help alleviate some of the workload. As Rick talked about the changes in staffing, the way it was structured before, in my role as the acting director, I took on some of the responsibilities. Now they're all falling on myself and Claudia, who's the other HR specialist. So that additional position would be very beneficial for us. If we go back to the budget, because are you going to advance to the next slide, Jerida? This just takes you through the recruitment cycle and what's involved. You know, it's we get a request from a department head to post the position. We decide what venue to use. We screen all the applicants. We schedule the interviews. We set up oral panels. We develop the questions and review them with the departments. And we actually sit in on every single full-time interview and most of the part-time interviews. So it's a large amount of time that's spent with this process. And it's just a very important process. And even more so, we're challenged lately with finding new ways to bring people in and making sure that our process is equitable. And so we find that we're spending much more time on this effort. So if we go back to the budget line items, you can see that the largest increase that we have is the addition of that position. We have an increase in our office expense, and that's just basically adding in for inflation. One of the functions that falls under the department is the Employee Recognition Committee. So we are doing a lot of, we do certificates of recognition in there. So there's some added expenses on that outreach to the staff. Our training budget was down. We moved some of that expense to the town manager's budget. Advertising, we reduced. We used to do a lot more paid advertising. Now we find that we're using a lot more free venues. We're doing the internet, and we're using a lot more of the professional associations to advertise for the specialized positions that we have. We also are intimately involved with the public safety recruitments, which take a lot of time. We've gotten rid of an online testing system that we used to use to test our applicants for police, and we now do that through a combined effort with Police App, and we do that with the police department. So that was a reduction in that fee. Our professional services is increased because we assumed the cost for all of the physicals for public safety, and that had been rolled into contractual services, and we felt that that was not really the right place for that charge to be processed, so we moved it into professional services. And education reimbursement, we increased that due to an increase that we provided to our staff in what we reimburse. And I think that covers all of those line items. I'll answer any questions anybody might have.
Councilor Blake.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Kathy, just two questions for you. One, I'm curious on how much time between the request for a position from the department to the actual start date of the candidate selected.
Well, we do track that, and it really depends on the position. I can tell you, I'll use Pete's payroll coordinator. We posted that job in December, and we just filled it this week. We did what we're finding is we may find a good applicant, we make the offer to the person, and then either their employer makes a counter offer or they decide they're not going to take the position. So we've had that experience often with delaying the start date, but we try to move as quickly as possible. It just depends on the position and the applicant pool that we attract.
Okay. Does this also apply to public safety candidates?
Public safety candidates, we get a pretty, we've been getting a pretty robust response to Police App, and we've been doing many interviews for them. So I would say we've definitely seen an increase in the number of applicants for public safety. Not quite sure why, but we have.
And what about that turnaround time too? Is it about the same in terms
Well,
of what you just stated for this position?
Well, with the police officers, we sit on the oral boards. Once we're done, we release that process to them. Then they have to do a background check, a polygraph test, reference check. So it takes quite a while for that person to come on board. It could take probably 3 months.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor Sweeney, one more question. Can you tell me the difference between the human resources specialist and the senior personnel analyst?
So they work underneath the HR specialist. They function at a more of a staff worker position. So one of the HR specialists is responsible for managing the health insurance enrollments, the changes. She handles the retirees, and she does some of our onboarding with new employees. And then the other one is strictly doing pension processing for town and Board of Ed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Set, Deputy Mayor.
Seeing no other questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'll do now is spend some time on our risk management fund. And our risk management fund is an internal service fund, which is independent of our general fund, and funds our employee benefit programs, our property and casualty insurance, workers' compensation, heart and hypertension. It's a process that the risk management fund will now fall. We're doing some restructuring within our HR and finance department, and this fund, Peter Privatera now essentially has full responsibility for the risk management fund. So our risk manager will actually report into Peter as we move forward. So if you turn to page 7.7, you can see you get an overview of our total, obviously a very large internal service fund that's applied for all of these coverages. But up at the top, you can see we are requesting about an 8.8% increase overall. And then if you go to the middle section, you can see our position schedule, and each of these positions is out. So we have this past year 3.7 FTEs were allocated to the risk management fund. So they were not in our general fund, they were funded through the risk management fund. Next year, we are requesting a risk coordinator position. So this would be a new position. It's a part-time position that we would request make full-time. However, it wouldn't be requested through the general fund. It would be requested through the risk management fund. So we have for next year proposing 4.6 full-time equivalent employees being allocated through the risk fund. Our risk manager, is projected to retire in October of this year, October of 23. So we will begin a recruitment process to replace Lisa Michaud this summer. But this risk coordinator would essentially help stabilize the risk management department, work closely with our safety analyst, and then certainly with our new risk manager as we brought that person on board. In the past, we've had those 3 positions. Over time, we went back to 2 and would be requesting to add that risk coordinator as we move forward. Again, funded through the risk management fund and not through the general fund. If you go down below, you can see risk management administration up 17.9% from 280,000 to 330,000. That's the addition going from part-time to full-time for that risk coordinator position. Workers' compensation up 5.8%. Health program up overall at 7%. Heart and hypertension is down 15%. Our self-insured program and our insured program, we're looking at some sizable increases in both of those areas. And I will walk us through those areas to give you more context around some of those increases. And I know as a council, we've been in executive session a couple of times over the last couple of months, talking about some large claims that are directly attributable to some of those increases that you're seeing. So again, if you turn to page 7, 8, this is the risk management administration. And again, the increase is primarily attributable to that extra half position going from removing that temporary payroll line item of $24,000 and reallocating a full-time position into the regular payroll, which is driving that increase. If you turn to page 7, 9, I'll talk us through the workers' compensation program. So we are self-insured, as folks know, on our workers' compensation program, and we have a $600,000 self-insured retention limit for all non-public safety employees, and then we have a $750,000 self-insured retention limit for our public safety employees. If you go to the workers' compensation claims line item in the expense section, you can see that we're going up about 6% in our claims number. I want to provide some context around that because overall, our workers' compensation program is running really well. So last year we had 257 workers' compensation claims filed at a total incurred cost of about $1.5 million. This year through April 1st, we are down to 151 claims and $815,000 in incurred claims. So down significantly across the board, which is great. Public safety is down, fire, police, public works is down. West Hartford Public Schools, which is probably our larger workers' compensation claims utilizer, is down significantly as well. So great news from that perspective. What's driving a lot of this increase, that overall 6% increase, is we have 2 very large workers' compensation claims that are outstanding right now that we're likely to have to settle with. Both have been essentially forced into retirement due to the nature of their disability. And we are looking at, working with our outside counsel and negotiating with these 2 claimants. So we are looking at a couple of claims that we will have to settle in both of those cases, which is primarily driving that 6% number in workers' compensation claims expenses. I talk about the good year that we're having, outstanding year, but we do have a couple of these that we need to settle potentially over the next fiscal year that is driving that increase in our workers' compensation line item. And I can pause there and see if there's any questions through you, Mr. Chairman, on workers' compensation.
Oh, sounds good.
All right, so if we turn to page 710, this is our health benefits program. So this was, as we know, we've always been a little bit complicated on our health program. So we did move our active employees all groups except for our firefighters into the state partnership plans. And I know we've talked about that with the council at large. So 4 years ago, the school district moved into the state partnership plan. And at that time, we saved about $2 million when we made that transition. And it's been, it's paid off greatly for the town and for the school district, in that we've had a couple of years of very, very low increases. One year we had a flat, no increase at all. And another year we had a 1% decrease in claims. However, that's changed over the last 2 years. We're starting to see medical inflation pick back up. Last year, if you go down to active employee claims, you can see we're up 15.5%. What did happen is last year, the state partnership plans renewal came in after we had adopted our budget. So it came in higher than we had projected, which is a factor of that 15.5%. This year, we budgeted 8% for this state partnership plan, and they came in they did come in with a renewal this year early, which is good for us. And it came in at a 7.5% increase. So down slightly from that 8% increase. But it's saving us approximately $36,000 on the town side, and it's saving us about $130,000 on the school side. School district has a significantly larger population that's covered under the state partnership plan. In addition to the state partnership plan, our firefighters continue to be insured or continue to be covered under the high deductible health plan through Anthem. So that is included in this active employee claim line item as well. If you go down, you see our normal retirement costs of $10.8 million. That's up from last year's number of $10.4 million. The town council. So we have, very unique, that we have, since 1985, we've had a retiree healthcare claim reserve account that's been set up, and we fund all of our retiree healthcare claims through this reserve. The town council has maintained a commitment to funding that healthcare reserve fund so that we can completely fund our retiree healthcare claims through that account. So essentially, we have a $240 million liability for our retiree healthcare claims. We are funding this account to, similar to our pension plan, to get to a point where, 28 years down the road, we will have fully funded our retiree healthcare obligations through that fund. Life insurance, long-term disability insurance, we did go out to bid last year. We had several active life insurance claims last year, as well as some retiree healthcare claims. Our experience just wasn't great. So we are looking at an increase for this year of 22%, but we're locked in for a 2-year rate guarantee. So that number next year will be a flatter number. And you can see the program expenses are down 27%. Our stop loss insurance is down 24%. That's a factor of going into the state partnership plan. So we're starting to see those expenses for those related items dropping as a result of that. So if you go to the bottom there, overall, we're looking at a total increase of 6.9% in expenses for our health benefits program. So I'll stop there for a moment through you, Mr. Chairman, see if there's any questions from the council. There being none, we can move on to our heart and hypertension program on page 712. So heart and hypertension, it's a self-insure program which provides benefits to our police officers and our firefighters. So, and we've talked about this in the past, and I'll go back, I'll do a little history here. Back in 1995, if a police officer or a firefighter incurred a heart condition or high blood pressure, that would be automatically covered through heart and hypertension. In 1996, it changed, and you had to prove causality. So prior to 95 and earlier, you get a heart condition, automatically covered under heart and hypertension. Since then, a firefighter or a police officer would have to prove causality. So you're essentially, this is a fund or a program that eventually will go away. So you will see over time, the average age of our claimant right now in the heart and hypertension is 84 years old. So when those folks pass on over time, that diminishes our liability. But overall, you can see that we're down 15%, which is good. And as I said, this will over time, we will see this number eventually diminish and go to zero at some point. So good news there, but I'll pause and through you, Mr. Chairman, see if there's any questions before moving on. There, Councilor Poland.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify, our public safety employees are able to make use of this program even after retirement, basically until death?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. I just want to make sure
So
I understood that.
But in 95, it was automatic. Any new retiree would have to prove causality with their condition to what their job was. So it's much tougher to prove nowadays than it was obviously before it was automatic.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, this is Mary. May I ask a question, Mr. With?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just curious, refresh my memory, because why do they need this special program? We have coverage in health benefits,
Mary, we can't.
retiree benefits, disability benefits, workers' comp benefits.
You're breaking up, Mary.
Oh God. Okay, sorry about that. I'll shoot you a note. I'm in a place probably doesn't have great internet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From what I heard at the beginning, Councilor Frey, heart and hypertension is it's state law. So for police and fire, we're required, every municipality is required to provide this particular benefit. But it is decreasing over time and will continue to do so as we move forward. But certainly email me your question for the rest of it that I may have missed, and we can get you that information.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next up, we have our self-insured program on page 713. So we are self-insured for general liability, automobile liability, law enforcement liability. We do have a self-insured retention level of $250,000. So we self-insure up to $250,000, and then we have various levels of insurance coverage that will pay on $1 after $250,000. And you can see our claims expense is up 21%, and that's a result of some significant potential claims that we will be looking at. Don't want to discuss them publicly, but we have had executive session with the council to discuss those, and those are what's driving this particular increase, as well as an increase I'll talk about in a moment. So I will pause there and turn it through you, Mr. Chairman, see if there's any questions about our self-insure program.
Seeing none.
All right, thank you. And then last on page 714, we have our insured program. So we are fully insured through FM Global, and there are various levels of coverage that we are provided under that self-insured program. And you can see we are adopted at $1.6 million, and we don't have our renewals in yet. We won't have them until May, but I'm working with our consultant. We've reserved more conservatively for the potential rate increases that we will see on this program. And again, there's different levels of coverage that are provided under this insured program. So we have cyber insurance, we have excess auto, excess general liability. And again, under the excess general liability, we have several large claims that we've discussed in executive session that are driving our concern over a potential rate increase that we will be looking at through FM Global. So working very closely with them right now. Our hope is to obviously minimize this increase as much as possible. But as of now, we did budget on the conservative side with an increase from 1.6 million to 2.1 million under our insured program through FM Global. So I'll pause there. Through you, Mr. Chairman, we will turn it over to the council for any questions there.
Seeing none.
All right, thank you. So that's a overview of our risk management fund. At this point, I will turn things over to Mr. Privatera, through you, Mr. Chairman, to walk us through the pension operating fund.
Thank you, Rick. If you turn to page 7-15 on the pension operating fund, the year-to-year increase is basically $641,000 or 1.6%. If you look at the revenue stream on the top, you can see that there are 4 contributions. One are the employee contributions. The second is the trust fund contribution, what actually comes out of the trust. The third is the pension reserve fund contribution. And the fourth is the actuarially determined employer contribution. Now, this is reflective of the issuance of pension obligation bonds. If you recall, when we issued the pension obligation bonds, we also created basically a pension bond reserve fund, and we created a policy that said that we would limit the increase on the ADEC or the contribution to 5% over the prior year. That's why you see the estimated ADEC of $7,038,011. It's only gone up 5% because the reserve fund kicked in the remaining requirement of $2.1 million. Again, if we looked at where we were when council approved this, barring any changes, we were looking at a $2.6 million year-over-year increase, and this reflects an increase of $641,000. Now, if you take into consideration what happened not too long ago, last year, when the markets were down like 12% and we didn't hit our goal, we lost a good chunk of our market value of our investments. The pension reserve fund contribution and policy basically stabilized our contributions on a year-over-year basis. Now that's $7,389,912. That's distributed to it's on the town, the Board of Education, and all other funds that have employees that are members of the pension plan. So when we get to non-departmental and you see that the ADEC is only 5.3 million, I think, that's, whatever that number is, that's only the town's portion of the liability. We spread this portion out to all funds and to the Board of Education as well, who have members in our pension plan. Now, if you go to the next page, if you look on page 7-17, you can see the revenue streams again on top, but on bottom, all of the various payroll categories, and we do have 1.6 full-time equivalents that are assigned to this from HR. But again, the significant increase here is the pension liability itself. We do have, for professional services, that $475,500. That's the pretty much the amount of money we pay all of the fund managers to manage all the various funds our investments are in. The risk management expense is the risk staff, the transfer out, the $37,000. That's transferred back to the general fund because my time and my staff's time working on pension liability issues. So all in all, again, I think this shows that the issuance of those pension obligation bonds really, saved the town from paying a significant liability both this year and next year as well. I mean, if there are any specific questions on the pension fund itself, I can try to answer them. Thank you.
Seeing no question. Oh, Ben. Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you, just one question on 717. The employee contribution increase. It's a large percentage, but that looks like there's a big gap between the adopted and the actual. Why is that such a big gap?
Between the adopted of 3.2 million and the actual of 3.5 million?
Yeah, because it looks like the proposed fits along with the estimated, but I'm wondering why.
Right.
It was that gap.
The employee contributions are basically tied back to union agreements and the number of employees that are employed by the town at the time. I mean, I could go back and certainly do an analysis on how many employees that we have when we hit the actual 3.5 million, and how many employees or how many vacancies that we have when we adopted at the 3.2 million. But I certainly can get that information. But I believe all of the employee contributions are identified in all of the various union contracts that we have, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. And for example, Council Winograd, we are currently negotiating with 6 different bargaining units. Kathy's leading those negotiations, and we didn't build in. We may negotiate a future increase to our pension plan. We didn't build it into the budget, but that may be the result of the negotiations that you would then see next year in a higher number as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. No, yeah, I mean, I understand that, of course. It looks like that was already done. So I didn't see that big a gap in terms of Social Security, for example, where the number of staff would impact that. I'm wondering whether or not during the year, did the percentages go up under any of our new contracts, perhaps, in that time period that we weren't anticipating? You can get back to me later on that.
Yeah, we'll get that information back to you. So they have gone up in the past. I know we can get those numbers to you.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing else.
All right. So if we could turn to page 16-1, which is our non-departmental overview. And I know, for example, our health district is located in the non-departmental line budget. You can see that we will, if you go halfway down, you see 11.1% increase. It's not really an 11.1% increase, but we will allocate $896,000 to the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District. It's actually really a 2.9%. We allocated $870,000 to them last year, increasing this year to $896,000. Mr. Privatera probably has a better explanation as to some of the accounting that occurred with that line item.
Thank you. Some of you may recall we used to contribute CDBG funding to the health district, and that CDBG funding was basically to do some inspections when their folks were out in the field. When the pandemic hit, their priorities changed from doing inspections to dealing with pandemic-related issues. So we were put in a position where we had to remove that money from their budget because they couldn't use it for the purpose it was intended, and we didn't want to get mixed up in an audit finding and say that you know, that we spent the money for a separate purpose that wasn't allowable at the time. So what you're seeing here is that 806,954. I think it was $50,000 or $75,000 more that was coming in CDBG funding. That's not reflective here because this is only a general fund contribution. The 896,325 is a total general fund contribution. So it's really not that we're giving them more. We are, but the fact is that we had to take away their CDBG funding because they could not spend it according to the guidelines in which it was presented. So that's why it looks like there's such a significant increase.
And then in other non-departmental line items, you can see this a significant increase in the radio system maintenance, 46.6%. That's a result of, I know we've talked to the council before about the new radio system that was implemented this year. You can see MDC down at the bottom, really fortunate to see a rather small increase in our MDC obligation to $12.1 million. In fact, it's the second year in a row we've seen year-over-year increases that have been very favorable to the town, which we're very appreciative to our partners at MDC. Anything else you'd want to highlight here, Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I just want to touch on the radio system maintenance. When we acquired the new system, we had a 5-year maintenance contract with that new system. And I can't believe it's already been 5 years. But that basically is a new maintenance expense related to the system because the 5-year contract maintenance period is up. As I pointed out earlier, the pension contribution of the $5.4 million, you know, that's the town's responsibility of that overall $7.3 million actuarial determined employer contribution. And also, if you right under that, you can see pension obligation debt service of $13 million. Our pension bond debt service is about $17.6 million, but the $13 million, that's our share of it. You know, again, some of these other contributions, you know, private school health services, non-public school transportation, those are reflective of increased costs associated with the program. I do believe that the non-public school transportation, one of the reasons why it went up because they added 2 more minibuses. And as you all know, we're obligated to provide transportation in non-public schools, so we included it in the budget amount. And there is a slight, you know, there's a decrease to the revaluation litigation. You know, the rationale behind that was that some of the larger commercial accounts that we've just completed in litigation with, our hope was that we don't have to go through that again with some of the large accounts. So we reduced that slightly. And I do believe we still have some money left over as a balance in the prior account, Joe, if I'm not mistaken. And that's pretty much it. The money we have in contingency is our estimate related to contract settlements. If they're not settled in time, then we'll accrue that. But yeah, overall, those are the highlights.
Back to you, Mr. Chairman, and the council for any questions.
Seeing no questions.
So we appreciate everyone's patience tonight. I know it was a long meeting and we covered a lot, but that would conclude our presentation of all the various departments that we highlighted tonight. Happy to answer any other follow-up questions that you may have on anything we discussed tonight.
All right. Go UConn. Enjoy.
Very good.
Yeah,
Enjoy the
go
game, folks.
UConn. All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a good
Thank you
evening,
so much,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.